The story begins with the news is being broadcasted on the topic of a tower called Babylon whose 40th floor has an undefeated monster. The news shows us how the Black Dragon Guild sets out to raid the 40th floor but fails to defeat the boss monster. Then a hunter ranks number 1 after he single-handedly defeated the boss monster. A reporter interviews him and addresses him with the nickname the Flame Emperor, but he seems to hate it and reacts negatively to the nickname. Online comments drop in as the whole world watches the news and people start saying different things. Some commenters begin to gossip about the Flame Emperor dating another hunter called the Saintess, but a S-rank hunter named Kim Gong-ya keeps commenting the same thing over and over again: "I want to become like the Flame Emperor." However, the reporter asks the so-called Flame Hunter to respond to the aspiring hunters. He says that in the end, those who are destined to succeed will succeed, and after they succeed, they shouldn't start a beef with him or else they will die. The words of the Flame Hunter affect Kim Gong-ya and it makes him furious that he starts to cry. Suddenly, a skill card appears before him as a compensation for the envy he has for the Flame Emperor. The skill card contains a skill that is greater than his current S rank. The golden card means that he copies the skill of the enemy that kills him and makes it his. He shouts, "What kind of skill is this?" The tower is seen to have appeared suddenly in their world and it can be seen from any horizon across the world. Different floors of the tower have different monsters from another world. Those that first entered the tower when it appeared were chosen by the tower and they gained special skills, but those that heard the rumors later on only entered the tower to hunt down the monster. The words of the Flame Emperor still affect Kim Gong-ya negatively and he finds himself in a bar. The news of how skillful the Flame Emperor is being broadcasted in the bar. Gong-ya doesn't feel the vibe and he asks the bar manager, "Can we watch something else?" Gong-ya begins to freak out and he complains about his new skills. He tells the bar manager that he can't even report it to the Hunters Association because he thinks the skill is crap. The bar manager quickly tells him to vomit outside after he wants to throw up. He leaves the bar shop and he keeps thinking about everything until he sees the Flame Emperor and his alleged girlfriend, Ms. Saintess, arguing by the corner, so he lures around and he listens. The Flame Emperor claims to have poisoned Ms. Saintess after she has initially tried the same on him. The Flame Emperor holds the antidote that can cure her as leverage, so he asks Ms. Saintess to confess whoever has sent her to kill him. He asks her if it was the Black Dragon who sent her, but she didn't talk, so he burns her. Kim Gong-ya perceives the fire illumination and he couldn't help it but goes out of his hideout and shouts, "Murderer, psychopath," and he runs away. The Flame Emperor gets hold of him and because he has seen what he has seen, the Flame Emperor kills him. Kim Gong-ya then wakes up in a strange realm and he sees a command that asks him to select a skill card. Then the skill card mysteriously copies out the Flame Emperor skill. However, he wakes up in his room as the news of another Black Dragon Guild's failure casts. He wonders how he gets to his room after Yusuha, the Flame Emperor, killed him. He checks the skill card details and he discovers he has been sent to 24 HRS before his death. However, he figures out he has copied that skill from the Flame Emperor. Kim Gong-ya then realizes that the Flame Emperor must have died due to the poison, but he came back 24 HRS prior, and that was how he knew what Ms. Saintess' moves were. He then hears a fire outbreak outside. He goes outside and he sees that people are gathered. Different guild members come to the scene waiting for the Flame Emperor. They try to quench the fire with water, but all is in vain. Kim Gong-ya knows the Flame Emperor actually set the fire in order to cover his tracks. The Flame Emperor then arrives and he begins to praise himself. He asks for what rewards they will give him if he stops the fire. Gong-ya gets tired of all the Flame Emperor's bad attitudes and he decides to kill him. He enters the fire to buy himself another 24 HRS back in time. He dies by the fire and he returns 24 HRS prior to his death. When he returns, he finally understands that no matter how much he tries to kill the Flame Emperor will still return to 24 HRS before 2, since they both have the same skill. He then figures out that the Flame Emperor's first awakening was 11 years ago, June 7th, which means his permanent death can only be met 45 days ago. So he decides to kill himself 45 times. He keeps stabbing himself and keeps waking a day backwards. Gong-ya finally gets to the present day that the legend of the Flame Emperor begins and he moves out to kill him. He first observes all Flame Emperor movements by dying 10 more times. Each time he dies, he uses the opportunity to study the Flame Emperor's whole lifestyle. Having known his daily movement and routines, he starts to execute his mission. He times him throughout and he finally gets to him on the 6th floor. He disguises as someone in need of urgent help as he comes out of nowhere saying he got attacked by wolves. Gong-ya offers him 20 gold to buy his portion, but the Flame Emperor complains of his ruined hunt, yet he wants to buy his portion for that cheap price. However, out of Yusuha's greediness, he extorts Gong-ya and he collects all the money he has without giving him the portion. He even turns back and decides to kill Gong-ya since he knows for himself that he has wronged him. As Yusuha tries to kill Gong-ya, what he never expected was a comeback from him. Well, Gong-ya rises all of a sudden and stabs him. Yu Su-ha dies with a shock, and in the end, Gong-ya feeds him to the wolves. He changes his cloth from the blood-soaked one to a new one he has hidden in the ground, and he leaves to transfer to Floor 1 City. He comes across a vigilante corps who seems to be unaware of anything, and the news also says nothing of Yu Su-ha. Then he drinks beer recklessly. He is very happy that the terrible legend of the Flame Emperor is no more as he flaunts his new skills and credits. Suddenly an old man walks in, requesting vodka and sugar and warm milk. Gong-ya looks at the old man suspiciously. The old man is the rank 1 hunter in this era, and Gong-ya thinks of how skillful the old man is. He continues to plunder that dying in the hands of any hunter means he will be able to copy their skills, even the skills of the current rank 1. Still in the bar, the old man, also known as the Sword Saint Marcus Callenberry, starts to talk to himself, and somehow it feels like he's referring to Gong-ya. Following that weird moment, Gong-ya gets terrible unknown messages on his phone about the Sword Saint. In these messages, Gong-ya learns of a word that should never be spoken to the Sword Saint. To buttress the message, a short story is being narrated on how the Sword Saint reacts to a group of hunters on the Floor 9 hunting grounds, where he strikes them after they made mention of his grandchildren in a mockery way. An advisory message which says if you don't want to die, don't talk about his grandchildren in front of Sword Saint pops in. All the messages are nothing but a big surprise to Gong-ya. Sword Saint King bores everyone in the bar with his attitude. He later leaves the bar and Gong-ya follows him. Gong-ya keeps wondering the kind of awesome skill the Sword Saint will have if Yu Su-ha has such an amazing X-rank returning skill. He follows him, but the Sword Saint already knows he's behind me. When they get to the bush where nobody can see what is happening, the Sword King turns to him suddenly. Plot twists, Gong-ya asks for his favor and he begins to say words Gong-ya doesn't understand. He finally accuses him of murder after he claims to have seen the number of kills on his head. Gong-ya begins to think about Yu Su-ha as his only kill, but turns out Gong-ya has actually killed 4091 people, the Flame Emperor and himself 4090 times. This is the number of kills the Sword Saint can see. This terrifies the Sword King and he attacks him. The Sword King sways his sword and Gong-ya dodges it. He trips and falls to the ground as the Sword King further talks to himself. Gong-ya begins to think that the Sword Saint is sharing his information with other people, and that will make him very notorious, and everybody will come after him and they will hang him eventually. Gong-ya figures he has to die to copy the Sword Saint's skills. Then he says words that pisses Sword King the most in his life to him. He speaks ill of Sword Saint grandkids. The Sword King beheads him immediately. Gong-ya dies and he goes back to the realm of skill acquisition, where he will pick one of the skills of the Sword Saint with the golden card, just as he did with the Flame Emperor. He then begins to have difficulty in selecting a card because there is no golden card, just silver and bronze cards. He finally picks a card and he beseeches the card to give him the skill behind the Sword Saint's success. Sword Saint's skill is then being copied and he returns back to life. He learns that he doesn't have the main Sword Saint skill, but he has an A+ passive skill. He opens the skill card afterwards. He suddenly hears someone talking beside him on the same bed and he doesn't know what is happening. Gong-ya hears the words of this strange guy as he talks about Gramps to go and train if he wants to train. He replies to this strange guy, and when he looks at Gong-ya, it shocks him too because he used to be with the Sword Saint. He asks Gong-ya if he can see him and he says he can. This strange guy is actually a ghost but can only be seen by whoever has him as his skill. Gong-ya eventually discovers he copied the Sword Saint's skills of having a ghost around him which only him can see and talk to. That explains why the Sword Saint has been talking to himself all these while. Ghost then screams, "Return me back to the Gramps right now." The ghost starts to freak out that he is in the company of a kid who even talks anyhow to him. He starts to blame the Sword Saint for not being responsible enough until a random kid clones him to himself. Gong-ya talks about the Sword Saint seeing the kill count of his head and the ghost disbelieves him instantly. "How can an amateur like you kill that much?" the ghost asks. Gong-ya explains how he earned that number of kills and how ends up in the current era and his will to die by the Sword Saint's hands so he can copy his powers to become the #1 hunter. The ghost hears him out and ends the conversation by asking Gong-ya to let him see him hunt some monsters. They go to the hunting ground and Gong-ya begins to kill monsters. The ghost finds out Gong-ya doesn't have any remarkable hunter's talent, but his no fear for death makes him spectacular. Ghost exclaims that the Sword Saint also has another version of him on his side. He would like to see who gets better between Gong-ya and Sword Saint. Ghost begins to like him and he claims to help him get better than anyone else, and he wants Gong-ya to take over the tower. The ghost shouts at Gong-ya to wake up and he requests for 5 minutes. The ghost insists that he rise up from bed, and when he manages to rise up, he discovers it's still 4 AM in the morning. They begin to quarrel and the ghost calls him zombie-ass mother since he just doesn't die. However, they go out and they discuss as they walk. The ghost criticizes Gong-ya for lacking talents and he somehow makes a gesture of him. Later, they go to Give and Take, a monopoly on the tower's economy owned by the rank 3 hunter called Countess. Her cheat skill makes it possible for users to trade with the outside world. Gong Ya speaks to the attendant who wears a cat ear cap. He requests for his lottery winnings. The attendant gets shocked when she collects Gong Ya's identification slip and she sees 53G. She goes to call the manager straight away. The manager comes and tells Gong Ya to follow him to the upper floor, and when they get there, he shows him his 53-0 gold. He however gives him a choice to either take the money or save, so he decides to save it. He then decides to buy Sang Ryan's honorary guild member title. Gong Ya doesn't belong to any guild on the tower yet, so he decides to join one because he figures out that the Flame Emperor rejected every guild, thereby making enemies of large guilds, and they eventually tried to poison him. He also asks the manager to get him a better apartment. He finally asks the manager to conceal his identity if any news outlet asks who the first place winner was. Gong Ya gets everything it give and take under control, and that impresses the ghost. Gong Ya and the ghost walk along the city, and the ghost advises him to either read scrolls of martial arts or get portions to boost his physical abilities. The ghost then recommends that he get the portion instead, and he suggests a store they can get it, so they head there. The Sword Saint passes by and Gong Ya quickly hides behind a trash can. The Sword Saint enters the same shop they want to get the portions. Since the Sword Saint is around, it becomes suicidal for Gong Ya to enter the shop, so he figures out another shop and they head there. As they go through the slum, the people around see Gong Ya talk to himself and they think he is crazy. When they get to the shop, they witness how the alchemist is being blamed for owing for long, and all her instruments and portions are being taken away. The alchemist pleads with them, but they turn deaf ears on her. The alchemists stand in the middle of the road helpless. She tries to get people to buy her portions, but they complain about how expensive her portions are. Gong Ya then goes to her and he tells her he wants to place an expensive order. The alchemist gets the biggest shock of her life when Gong Ya mentions 20k for the portion he wants to order. The pharmacist invites Gong Ya into her shabby shop and he asks him to place his order. As they speak about the price, the pharmacist makes it clear she won't take the order if it's drugs. Gong Ya reassures her it's not drugs, and they continue to talk about the order. The ghost whispers the ingredient for the portion to Gong Ya after the pharmacist asks him for it. He tells the pharmacist simultaneously as the ghost tells him. However, the ghost still doesn't think the pharmacist is competent, but as soon as she explains how to mix the ingredients, the ghost starts to feel her. Gong Ya and the ghost then leave her shop and they discuss her expertise. Gong Ya spills out that he actually did all that because she becomes the head honcho of the alchemy castle 10 years later. After 4 days, the pharmacist delivers the portion to Gong Ya. Out of curiosity, she asks Gong Ya why he patronizes her despite her falling status and reputation. Gong Ya thinks of what the pharmacist becomes in the future and the way she smartly despises the Flame Emperor. He replies to her and says he only orders from her because she is a kind woman and he wants her to succeed. The pharmacist leaves after she tells Gong Ya if he has anything else to order, he should call her and she will prioritize his request. Gong Ya and the ghost then go to the 3rd floor hunting ground of the tower to test out the portion, and he drinks it. He gets terrible reactions from within and the ghost teaches him how to master the elixir in his system. As they talk, monsters arrive and Ghost tells him to run. Gong Ya stays back and decides to fight the monster orc. He doesn't know how to kill the monster exactly, but he runs around listening to whatever the ghost instructs. He gathers aura to his feet and this makes him have high jump power, and he jumps to strike the monster. He lands on the chest of the monster and he slays the monster, but the monster's skin is so tough that his blade can't penetrate. The ghost then tells him to gather his aura on the tip of the blade, so he does it. He finally kills the monster after several noob attempts because he hasn't meditated yet on the use and control of the aura. Due to this, he feels too weak after slaying the monster. The effect of using an aura without meditation is a total body weakness. He feels too weak and he dies by the hand of another orc monster. He returns back to the realm as usual and the ghost follows him there. He explains to the ghost that he comes to the realm whenever he dies and he gets to copy the skill of whoever kills him. It shocks them when they discover the monster orc also has skills. Gong Ya observes the skill cards and he wonders which one might be the best one to select. Unlike Gong Ya, the ghost can see the kind of skill each card has because he is a ghost who can fly around. Gong Ya happily asks him to read the skills to him so that he can select the best one. Made easy, the ghost reads the skills and Gong finally makes his selection. He copies the TCH weak skill, a skill that can be used to trick an orc monster to become vulnerable. After the selection, he wakes back up in his house 24 HRS prior, and he decides to go back to the hunting ground. Gong Ya does everything as he wishes and that really worries Ghost. Ghost decides to train him to master the aura for 6 months, but Gong Ya turns it down and heads to the 3rd floor to kill some monster orc. He uses the TCH weak skill to trick the monster, and the moment the monster becomes vulnerable, he strikes him down. The ghost complains about that cheat and they set to enter the 4th floor. A week later, they get to the 5th floor and Gong Ya kills the Goblin King with the Gorak skill. It appears Goblin King is the strongest enemy Gong Ya will kill that week. After killing the Goblin King, Gong Ya levels up and his skill slot expands. He becomes an E-rank hunter right away. The ghost then starts to lecture him about the shape of aura he will possess by what effects show up when he levels up. He talks about the Flame Emperor and the Sword Saint aura traits. However, Kim Gong Ya even wants more challenges and he aspires to go to the 10th floor. He then bets with the ghost that if he clears the 10th floor successfully, the ghost must start to call him Gong Ya politely. The ghost has been calling him zombie ever since. The ghost tries to discourage him but he insists and manipulates the ghost. People stare at him as he talks to Ghost and they conclude he's insane. When he gets to the entrance of the 10th floor with the unseen ghost, the guard denies his access. The guard complains of the failure of the strong Black Dragon Guild Master and its members. He refuses to see any possibility of a low-level hunter hunting solo. He even calls the mission suicide. Gong Ya then fabricates lies and he tells the guard that he recently lost his lover and the alchemist even told him he has an incurable illness and he would die soon. He pleads with the guard to allow him to enter anyway and die honorably as a hunter since his life will come to an end soon. He butters the bread of lies by even giving the guard some money and he gains entrance. The guard eventually lets him enter and he goes into a building for the 10th floor challenge where many fire-emitting dolls await him with a hide-and-seek game invitation. This chapter takes us back to the news about Black Dragon Guild 30th time failure being broadcasted and the Black Dragon claims they had bad luck. But then the Flame Emperor says luck is also a skill as he has just cleared the 10th floor. Gong Ya relates how the Flame Emperor cleared the 10th floor and claimed he was lucky, whereas his skill was Fire Aura, meaning the fire of the 10th floor can't affect him. Gong Ya accepts to play hide and seek with the fire dolls. He has to find a single real doll and destroy it while the time counts down until the fire burns him. Once he picks a doll at random but it isn't the real one so it melts off. Gong Ya stands clueless while the time counts down. As soon as the time is up, the fire blazes angrily and it burns Gong Ya to death. He returns back to the skill acquisition realm and he reminds the ghost of his promise to call him by his real name Gong Ya not zombie. He asks the ghost to read out the skills to him. He doesn't go with the ghost's opinion as he chooses the skill he thinks is best. He chooses a skill that allows him to figure out the real doll, not the one that makes him overcome the fire barrier. After he selects the skill, a penalty occurs due to the skill. The trauma of the monster fire maiden recreates. Gong Ya begins to see orphan children in another world begging for bread and getting rejected by the people. Then comes a man who seems nice and decides to take this particular orphan away to safety. He takes the little girl to a house and he cages her. Turns out the man is actually a bad man and he claims the innocent orphans are plagues to their society and they should be eradicated. They sacrifice these young orphans and kill them. The ghost also joins Gong Ya in experiencing this bitter trauma. However, the ghost doesn't feel as bad as Gong Ya feels. Suddenly, still in the trauma experience, the house the orphans are being kept goes on fire, and the evil workers begin to run, leaving the caged orphans behind. Gong Ya witnesses every last evil that was done to these orphans and the trauma ends. When he wakes back up 24 hours prior as usual, he becomes very moody, and the ghost says words that even make things worse for him. As they approach the 10th floor, Gong Ya says he'd rather save the doll than destroy it. The ghost starts to freak out because saving the doll is clearly not the way of clearing the 10th floor. However, Gong Ya figures out that the only way to clear the floor is to play with the dolls because that is actually what they want. He plays the hide and seek game with them and in the end, he finds the real doll and he successfully clears the 10th floor. Gong Ya feels moody and somehow depressed after clearing the 10th floor about how wicked the world is. The ghost begins to praise him afterwards and then suddenly, fireworks shoot up in the sky. The news that the 10th floor has been cleared overtakes the atmosphere and people start wondering who just cleared the 10th stage. Numerous messages drop in on the net, all aimed at pointing out who actually cleared the 10th floor, but no answer is being obtained. All the top hunters are definitely not the 10th floor clearer as they are found doing something else. Suddenly, the 10th floor gate guard runs towards Gong Ya to confirm it, but he tries to hide his identity from him. He eventually let the guard know he was the one who cleared the 10th floor. Gong Ya then reminds the ghost of his promise to call Lord Gong Ya if he clears the boss in 2 coins. Gong Ya goes to a cafe and he keeps talking to the ghost about his victory until a cat goes to me and he takes the cat. Afterwards, some guild leaders come and they confirm his identity. Immediately they discover he is Gong Ya. They begin to bid him with different prices to join their guild. The cat he picks up during the conversation transforms into the Countess and she offers him the biggest amount. After the low-level guild leaders get outmatched by the Countess, they excuse themselves. Then rank 5 guild leader, Viper, barges in and criticizes Countess for bidding Gong Ya quickly. Rank 4, Heresy Inquisitor also walks in. Rank 8 and Rank 2, Paladin and Black Dragon respectively join them as well. Turns out the top rankers actually know one another and they criticize the Countess for offering 50k gold. As they rant, Heresy Inquisitor suggests that they should all order coffee first before they settle the matter. They all place their orders and they sit round a table to discuss. They first talk about how skillful Gong Ya is to have solo cleared the 10th floor. Black Dragon then asks Gong Ya to join a guild afterwards. Black Dragon explains the importance of becoming part of a guild to Gong Ya. She continues that the outside world needs hope about the tower by learning about the leading guild and its achievements. Also, to make the tower adventurous, he has to join a guild. They explain why they need his identity open to the outside world so that it can restore hope for the first floor hunters and also creates an avenue for the world generally. Gong Ya then decides to join one of them by playing a card game with all of them. Whoever wins gets to have him in their guild. They all consider Gong Ya's decision to be fair and they accept to play with him. He plots with the ghost to peep on their cards eventfully. The ghost agrees without hesitation since Gong Ya assures him of no more calling him Gong Ya. The ghost goes behind all the top rankers and exposes what they plan to play to Gong Ya, and he effortlessly wins them in all the rounds they play. Some of the top rankers begin to lose their minds. As they play and lose to Gong Ya, they get fed up and they leave the table one after the other. Viper accuses him of cheating after he won over 30 rounds they played. Viper gets tired of losing and he leaves to meet the Heresy Inquisitor. Now it remains Gong Ya, Black Dragon and Paladin. Paladin loses next as well and she leaves the table. Now, it remains just Gong Ya and Black Dragon and Countess decides to distribute the card for them. As the game goes on, Black Dragon narrates her story to Gong Ya and the audience says wherever one comes from doesn't matter to the tower. As they play the final game, they both stake higher and they discuss more. They talk about the tower and its challenges. Gong Ya talks about his affinity for the tower and Black Dragon compliments him. They finally come to the end of the game and Gong Ya wins. His objective of not joining any guild is finally met and he ends the meeting with his zeal to excel to reach the 100th floor without making enemies with anybody. He permits them to expose his identity if that means good to the outside world. He then leaves the cafe after he tells them the 11th floor will be opened soon. People gather around waiting for the opening of the 11th floor and they talk about how the media leaves them clueless of who cleared the 10th floor. Kim Gong Ya and the top rankers are also present. Time counts down and just on the verge of opening the 11th floor, Gong Ya's name is being revealed on the net. A hologram appears above them and speaks to them about the 11th floor. The Sword Saint jumps to the top of the building and he transfers first to the 11th floor. Other hunters begin to transfer and Paladin engages Gong Ya in a conversation. She does that so as to bring people's attention towards him. The ghost suspects that as they talk. Suddenly the meteor rushed towards Gong Ya and that's when he discovers Paladin has exposed him. Paladin then transfers to the 11th floor leaving Gong Ya behind to battle with different questions from the media. Gong Ya manages to say something to the media before he transfers too. He tells them well, word hard, everyone. Happening on the 11th floor is a great battle between the Kingdom of Ejim and the Demon Army. The hunters find themselves suddenly in the middle of the battlefield. The hunters transfer to the port of the Ejim Empire where monsters raid and the commander of the empire fights courageously. The hunters remain clueless of their objective on the battlefield. The Ejim commander sees them and he beseeches them to bestow their blessings upon Ejim. Then the monsters start to attack them as well. Sword Saint immediately beheads the monster and they begin to fight alongside Sword Saint. Gong Ya stands confidently in the battle without fighting any monster and he starts to receive floor 10 rewards. Displaying before Gong Ya are valuable skills rewarded from floor 10 to allow him to navigate floor 11 to 20 easily. He gets the location skill and he chooses the leadership skill. He puts the location and the leadership skill together to bring about an ultimate skill. Gong Ya has never led an army before so he plans to acquire that skill from the Ejim commander. However, he goes to the NPC commander Sarba's Ejim. He manipulates the commander to kill him. He fabricates lies that get the ghost speechless. He tells the commander that if he dies, the god of war will bless the battlefield. At first, the commander does not welcome the idea of killing a hunter from another world, but then, Gong Ya persuades him closely, and he concurs. The commander kills him eventually and he copies his skills. Gong Ya dies and returns back in time to 24 HRS and he gets back to the battlefield. He is then seen to be riding with the soldiers with a special sword in his hand. Gong Ya starts to lead the army to victory on the battlefield. He has been dead previously, meaning he has repeated the day and he has learnt one or two from what happened and how. He gives directions to the commander in order to locate the demon army's general. He checks the map and he tells the general to make certain turns. He appears in the battle with the Ejim's Empire legendary Holy Sword. Legend says that a goddess gifted it to the founder of the Ejim Empire. Before history became a legend, the founder went missing, and the Holy Sword also vanished. Then the goddess leaves behind a prophecy that when the faithful day arrives, the one wielding the Holy Sword shall also arrive. The one who possesses the Holy Sword of Protection will receive absolute trust and support from the people of Ejim Empire. The soldiers see the sword in Gong Ya's hand and they begin to hail him. Together with the help of the Holy Sword and the minimap as a gift for clearing the 10th floor, Gong Ya leads the army purposefully. Other hunters watch as Gong Ya rides with the commander and they wonder why he is the only hunter in that position. Gong Ya listens to their babbling with the aura and the ghost criticizes him for abusing the aura. He leads the army throughout the battle and he tells them to charge towards the main forces. As they clear their way to the Demon King, they finally see the Demon King and they charge towards him. Gong Ya jumps up and he activates the Gorak skill in the air. He then slays him and they win. After the victory, the armies rejoice and they give thanks to the goddess's hero Gong Ya. They all chant "Long live the Empire." The hunters hunt down the remaining goblins and they kill them all. With this, floor 11 has been cleared. The raid participants are therefore being assessed and ranked. The rank displays and Gong Ya tops the list. The hunters wonder why he doesn't have an alias and they even wonder how the Sword Saint came second on the list. Gong Ya and the ghost then have a silent conversation. Gong Ya tells him to admit that his skill is amazing, but the ghost refuses to acknowledge that. He promises the ghost that he will learn some swordsmanship before he clears the floor 20. Then the ghost starts to feel himself. However, the commander arrives and he thanks Gong Ya for the bravery he displayed. He asks him to have his deepest gratitude. The commander narrates the prophecy of a demon king's arrival and heroes from another world coming to save the kingdom, but he says he was actually skeptical about the prophecy. He then shakes Gong Ya. The final rule of the floor 11 then displays and it says until the top contributors are given their rewards, the remaining participants are banned from entering floor 12. As Gong Ya transfers to the 12th floor, the ghost warns him about meeting the Sword Saint there. The ghost says that the Sword Saint will come at him like a madman. Gong Ya then tells Ghost that he has his ways. Arriving with him is Heretic Inquisitor, who praises him for what he did back on the 11th floor. As they converse, the Sword Saint tries to strike Gong Ya, but Heretic Inquisitor blocks it for him. She asks the Sword Saint why he is trying to attack Gong Ya. Sword Saint refuses to tell her why he wants to kill Gong Ya. Sword Saint then threatens to cut off one of Heretic Inquisitor's arms if she doesn't move. The moment she hears that from the Sword Saint, she uses her skill to teleport Viper and Paladin to the scene. They jump at the Sword Saint, but he defends himself. Viper had to wonder what the old Sword Saint eats to keep him that strong. Viper starts to lose focus and Paladin cautions him to focus on the fight in front of him. Heretic Inquisitor then asks Countess to give her 20k gold. Countess eventually gives her and she does her holy techniques on the gold. She brings about the Celestial Clan Master and they all face Sword Saint. Black Dragon also joins them because Gong Ya has previously had an agreement with the 5 guilds. Black Dragon says if the Sword Saint must kill Gong Ya, then he has to first go through all of them. At that moment, Gong Ya communicates with Ghost with his mind and he reminds him of the words he said on floor 11. There are 2 ways to fight against a strong opponent. One is to have enough raw power to crush an army by yourself and the other is to raise an army yourself. He reminds the Ghost because right now, the 5 guilds are the army he has raised should in case the Sword Saint tries to kill him. Gong Ya then talks to the Sword Saint in a polite way as if he is completely innocent. Deep inside of Gong Ya, he knows the Sword Saint can actually see the kill count on his head. The Sword Saint maintains his ground and wants to kill Gong Ya. He shares why he has been hunting alone in the tower because he wants to show people that one could stand on top by himself. He says one can become the greatest here with just a single sword. He says they can survive with just talent and effort. The Sword Saint then blames them and his words really hurt the Black Dragon. Viper accuses the Sword Saint of not supporting them and that led to the death of some hunters. They start to howl abuses on Sword Saint. He tells them to shut up. If they want to fight, they should fight with swords, not mouth. Gong Ya then intervenes and starts to settle the dispute. He admonishes them to come together rather than fight. Black Dragon tells him the issue has nothing to do with him, but he insists, and he continues to urge them to come together and focus on clearing the 12th floor. Paladin then comes up with her lie detection skill and she claims to put an end to whatever is making the Sword Saint want to kill Gong Ya. She first makes sure the Sword Saint agrees to the lie detection tryout. She assures them she will guarantee the validity of their statements. The Sword Saint puts his faith in Paladin because he knows the Paladin is the only one to have never harmed any human being. Paladin starts the lie detection and tells the Sword Saint to ask questions. The Sword Saint then asks, is it true you've murdered over 4,000 people? Then Gong Ya replies yes, but because in the actual sense, Gong Ya has only murdered one person, the Flame Emperor. Paladin gets a wrong answer and the Sword Saint accusation becomes nullified. The Sword Saint starts to freak out that Gong Ya is lying. However, Gong Ya starts to explain the reason why he had to kill the Flame Emperor because he was a bad person. He continues that the Flame Emperor actually tried to kill him. They reason with Gong Ya and they end up finding nothing bad in what he did. Afterwards, Sword Saint also calms down and Gong Ya requests an apology from him. They all perceive the Sword Saint to be in the wrong and they ask him to apologize to Gong Ya. The Sword Saint eventually bows before Gong Ya and he apologizes. He blames himself for killing anyone he perceives as a murderer without finding out what the person actually is. He says he will stop that act of killing according to his belief. He then promises to do whatever Gong Ya wishes, so Gong Ya asks him to teach him sword fighting and to accept a duel request whenever he asks. Paladin confirms everything the Sword Saint has said to be true. Heretic Inquisitor cherishes the moment and she says a true apology is a holy miracle. Boom, Countess interferes and she says, does that mean my 20k gold was wasted for nothing? The Sword Saint shakes Gong Ya vigorously and he promises to even look after him henceforth. The Sword Saint says he knows a highly skilled tailor so that Gong Ya can have a good outfit. Out of submission to Gong Ya, the Sword Saint even tells him he will link him up with his granddaughter. He tells them he has a granddaughter outside the tower and if she ever makes it to the T-Tower, he will sell her to Gong Ya's charms. Gong Ya obviously isn't a womanizer, so he turns down the proposal and Sword Saint begins to freak out. After the theme of floor 11 to 20 appears to be role-playing, 2 rewards appear. Gong Ya is then left to choose between the goddess and the demon rewards. The goddess reward contains rewards of becoming the Empire's Chancellor and he gets the abilities and status deserving of the position. The demon reward on the other hand contains rewards similar to the goddess rewards, but he gets one additional gift of getting transferred directly to the 99th floor after he kills the top 10 heroes. The hunters see Gong Ya staring into the air as he ponders on what is before him. The selection begins and the first ranker on the list gets to select first and then others can make their selections. Gong Ya prefers to select none because he figures out that it will be better for him to select none and see who would select the demon reward and kill them. After the demon reward selector kills them, Gong Ya knows he gets the chance to return back. This surprises all of them. The selection then goes down the list and each and every one of them selects between the goddess and demon reward. It reaches the Sword Saint's turn to select and after he sees the 2 rewards, he finally understands why Gong Ya decides to select none of the rewards. However, the Sword Saint ends up selecting the goddess reward and he picks Ejim Empire's head knight. It reaches the Heretic Inquisitor's turn and she decides to display the rewards for the rest to see. So they are able to see the rewards and they finally understand why Gong Ya doesn't pick any rewards. The Heretic Inquisitor then picks the goddess rewards as well and she picks the Empire's Great General. Viper chooses the head royal bodyguard and Paladin chooses the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Black Dragon picks the role of Chancellor and Countess chooses the Minister of Finance. As they select, they advise themselves not to select the demon reward because whoever selects it would be at a disadvantage. After they all finish selecting, the result comes and it appears someone actually selects the demon reward. Paladin is then called to interrogate everyone with the lie detection. The Black Dragon claims to kill whoever has picked the demon reward. Rather than finding the traitor with lie detection, Paladin asks them all to confess first. They didn't suspect Gong Ya because he didn't even pick any reward in the first place. However, Paladin still asks him and he says no. They all testify to choosing the goddess reward. Then who is the traitor? They all start to panic. Paladin tells them that the traitor might have a skill that hides their lies. Sword Saint then says it might also be Paladin herself. They start to talk about the bond the 5 guilds have over the years, that it's not now that someone will break it. After they establish that a strong bond exists between the top 5 guilds for good 10 years, Heretic Inquisitor and Viper then kill the last 3 rankers with her special skill. Turns out the traitor isn't among the 3 they just killed and this makes the Sword Saint really angry and he attacks the Heretic Inquisitor. He cuts her hand and Viper begins to fight him. The Sword Saint is too strong for Viper, then he cries out for help. The other guild masters then begin to fight the Sword Saint. Heretic Inquisitor peers a portion on a cutout arm. Paladin sees the chaos and she quickly asks Gong Ya to stop the Sword Saint. Gong Ya gains the privilege to settle the dispute after Paladin and trusts him because he didn't even make any selections, so he's clear of being the traitor. He ponders on what he has become now that the vice captain gives him full authority over the situation. He then begs the Sword Saint to stop the fight. He tells him that he will meet his granddaughter whenever she comes into the tower. The Sword Saint stops to fight them, but he says since they've crossed swords, they will die by his hands anytime from now. He says it won't be too late to kill them after they've uncovered the traitor. However, the fight stops and they try to focus on finding the traitor. Gong Ya suggests that if they break the Demon King's core, the reward automatically disappears and they no longer have to worry about the traitor. As Gong Ya guides them to focus them on their pursuit, the Demon King manifests. The soldiers on floor 12 start to freak out as the rain from their nightmares starts to fall. It's currently at war. Gong Ya stands and sees the Demon King from afar. Did you think you foolish plebeians could call over people from another world to use as your shields? The Demon Kings refers to the NPCs. The challenge seems to be very difficult for the guilds and they start to freak out. They finally work together and they devise a means to stop the Demon King. They decide to play the role they selected from the goddess reward. Gong-ya tells each and every one of them to act the role they hold. He tells Viper, the head royal bodyguard, to lead the royal bodyguards. He tells Paladin, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to find the Emperor since it won't be easy to lead the NPCs while their leader is missing. He tells the heretic Inquisitor, the Great General, to get on top of the castle walls and console the soldiers who are losing their minds. All of them then move out to execute their roles. The Black Dragon appears beside Gong-ya all of a sudden. He asks her how she gets there. She tells him she has teleportation skills. The ghost whispers to Gong-ya that he needs to get Black Dragon to kill him because that skill sounds cool. Black Dragon then asks Gong-ya to teleport with her. After revealing her teleportation skill restriction to Gong-ya, he decides to teleport with her. Eventually they teleport to the top of the wall and they give motivational words to the soldiers as the Black Dragon raises Gong-ya's hands with the legendary sword. Gong-ya reenacts the trauma of his killer and he begins to experience it. The Demon King subdues everywhere and affects the armies with the blood rain that falls. The Demon King triumphs in the trauma Gong-ya experiences. Suddenly, the holy sword emits light and it stops the rain. The armies rejoice and they hail the goddess for saving them from the blood rain. Black Dragon then yells at them to stand up and hold up their spears. Gong-ya stares at Black Dragon as she motivates the armies. The Black Dragon knows how to give a speech before she is from Ukraine, and Ukrainians do give good speeches. However, Gong-ya and Black Dragon begin to talk about how to stop the Demon King. Gong-ya asks her to teleport him to where he can be one-on-one with the Demon King. Black Dragon calls it suicidal, but Gong-ya feels it should be a win. The light from the goddess annoys the Demon King and he retaliates with his own light and he destroys everywhere. He destroys the royal chamber and one hero dies. The Black Dragon figures out it might be Countess. Gong-ya worries about the tower's connection with the outside world because the Countess controls that. Black Dragon then tells him to focus on what is in front of them, which is the Demon King. She teleports Gong-ya right to the front of the monsters and the ghost begins to teach him how to fight them. Gong-ya drinks a portion to strengthen himself. The ghost then tells him to become a hero. Gong-ya fights his way through the goblins by timing his every movement. The ghost instructs him to sway his sword continuously. He kills the monster one after the other and he gets carried away by the art of sword fighting. After 10 seconds, he encounters a large monster and he slays it flawlessly. His existence becomes better defined and he levels up to a D rank hunter. After 30 seconds, the Sword Saint joins him in the fight and he tells him his name. He realizes that during an intense fight, everyone becomes different. The Sword Saint then asks to fight together with him. The heretic Inquisitor then arrives with the troops and they begin to kill the monsters. Viper also joins Gong-ya and he tells him that he has brought his guildies along with the royal troops. Gong-ya doesn't hear him, so Viper fights with him. Paladin also joins them and she gives her own side of the duty. She says she found the Emperor but he has poisoned himself. Gong-ya keeps fighting immensely since he doesn't hear what they are saying. The Sword Saint tells Paladin to leave Gong-ya when she tries to call him. The hunters then get to the Demon Lord and they come together. Black Dragon is going to teleport them close to the Demon King where they will attack. Black Dragon reaches out to Gong-ya who is busy fighting to come so that they can teleport together. Gong-ya knows he only wants to be killed by the Demon King so that when he comes back, he gains more strength. He joins with the rest and they teleport and land in front of the Demon King. He lets go of his hand and he tries to strike the Demon King. The Demon King asks, "Have you come to kill me?" And Gong-ya replies to him, "I came here to die to you, fucker." He dies as he shows the Demon King his middle finger. He starts to copy the Demon King's skills. Gong-ya wonders why the tower gives an opportunity of skill copy to someone as worthless as him. The ghost checks the skills and he volunteers to read it out to Gong-ya. Gong-ya then tells him to read it. Gong-ya knows the tower is probably disappointed in the attitude demonstrated by the hunters. The ghost shares the first skill, resentment pours like rain, with him. He shares the next skill, echoes of a crying heart. He also shares the next skill, ghoul summoning, with him. As he shares all the skills, Gong-ya thinks about the tower and the events. Gong-ya selects a skill eventually and he asks the ghost about the daily routine of the Sword Saint. The ghost agrees to let Gong-ya know the Sword Saint dinner schedule when he says he needs it for something. Gong-ya completes the skill selection and the copy begins. He faces the trauma penalty afterwards. "Are you leaving already?" Black Dragon asks Gong-ya. Gong-ya has gone back in time to floor 10. Floor 11 will be opening soon and Gong-ya looks tense. Black Dragon asks him what is wrong with him. What else will Gong-ya say? He lies yet again. He says he got a bit emotional thinking about how amazing people are here with him. He then tells the guild masters that the information he was given for clearing floor 10 allows him to know the situation on floor 11 and the quest. However, he asks for their favor in exchange for the information he has. They agree to give him the favor later whenever he asks for it. He then begins to explain the situation of floor 11 to them. After he finishes, he asks Paladin to go on a walk with him and she agrees. They walk towards the slum and the ghost hints to Gong-ya that the Sword Saint is following them, but he shouldn't look back. They finally get to the pharmacist's shop and they enter. The pharmacist is happy to see Gong Ya and she asks who Paladin is. Gong Ya tells her about Paladin and she bows down immediately and she starts to beg. She claims not to sell drugs. However, Gong Ya tells the pharmacist that Paladin is not here to inspect her but he rather brings her as a customer. This makes the pharmacist really happy, and right there, Sword Saint enters the shop and he requests for private chat with Gong Ya. And that's how the first part of this manga ends.